Welcome everyone to the last U-Spatial brown bag of the semester. I'm Lucas Winzenberg from U-Spatial. Happy everyone could join us today. We've got some folks joining us remotely from around different campuses as well, so we'll see how that works out. Folks who are listening, let us know if you need sound adjusted or something. Today's speakers are Ryan Mattke and Kevin Dyke from University Libraries, and they're going to talk about some exciting data resources available through university subscriptions. So take it away, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucas. So, I'm Ryan Mattke. I'm the head of the Borchardt Map Library, for anybody that doesn't know me. My half of this session was sort of born out of training that I had some U-Spatial RAs do with library liaisons, showing them how to use Esri Business Analyst. And we kind of got into a discussion about, well, what do the libraries have that also provide the same types of things, so GIS data or web mapping. And it turns out that maybe I haven't talked enough about what the libraries have to offer. So I'm going to go through, I think, 6 different web mapping applications that the library subscribe to. So these are things that are not freely available. Some of them, I think one, Social Explorer, does have a free component, but thanks to our NHGIS here on campus, which provides the data for that one, we get special access to everything else through Social Explorer. So these are all licensed tools. These are things that we provide access to for staff, students, faculty at the university. And there's going to be a variety of things. You can make web maps, you can save them, you can download data, you can download GIS data. It's kind of a mix of things. So this presentation is available at z.umn.edu/webmapapps. And we'll make sure Lucas sends that out after the presentation as well, because this has a lot of links in it. So the first two we're going to talk about are somewhat similar in kind of how they approach things. They're both web mapping applications. They have a different focus for each one, but they allow you to download GIS data. Well, the second one, they're working on it. You will be able to download GIS data. But one of them allows you to upload your own points. One of them doesn't. One of them allows you to search for different types of things versus the other. So SimplyMap is more focused on business data overall. And so what it is you can create maps and you can download shape files. It has a lot of stuff in there. It has consumer expenditures, retail sales, sales potential, consumer price index, business counts, some things that are similar to Esri Business Analyst. It also has census data for 2010, 2000, 1990, and 1980, and those are normalized up to either 2000 or 2010 boundaries. And then it has other data as well. It has uniform crime reports, some life stage data, and then also some healthcare data. And I should say this is all focused on the United States. The other big thing it has is business locations, and it uses Dun & Bradstreet for their business locations. So you can search either by business name, you can search by SIC or NAICS codes. I don't remember what those stand for, but those are standardized codes for types of businesses or industries. And so instead you could search for all Starbucks, but you could also then use the SIC code, and I'll show you that for, say, all coffee shops, and kind of pull that in. And the nice thing is you can download that data, that point data, once you have it. And they have just added, I think in the last 6 months, instead of just the address, you also get the lat-long coordinate of that point, which makes it a lot easier for geocoding. And then, as I mentioned, you can export the data as spreadsheets, shapefiles. You can export an image of the map. As with, I feel like, all online web maps, some of them are better or worse at exporting what you see on the screen. SimplyMap actually does a very good job of allowing you to create what the final PDF or PNG file that you get looks like. Some of the other ones just kind of export on their own, and the results are not the best. And then I'll talk about Policy Map, and that is focused more on demographics, income and spending, housing, lending, quality of life, economy, education, health, federal guidelines, and analytics. And what they are is more focused on, I'd say, more of a social aspect to it, urban studies type stuff, looking at, we kind of tailor SimplyMap if we're presenting these to different departments. SimplyMap is more marketed towards people, say, from the Carlson School, whereas Policy Map is more people from the Humphrey School, if that kind of makes a bigger distinction there. They have both point and polygon data, so data points and data layers. They have specialized data sets, so they have a limited supermarket access, for example, and they have other stuff under their analytics that I'll show you that is specific things that this company has created that can be useful for people. You can also load in your own data points from a spreadsheet. So if you have a spreadsheet of addresses for your study locations, you can load those in and then load up the data from PolicyMap behind it and export maps that way. So in the spirit of adventure, we're going to do some live demo. So as I mentioned, these are all licensed library resources, so you'll need to get to these through the library webpage or through the map library webpage. What it's going to do is, on campus, it doesn't really matter when you're accessing these things, but off campus, you will not get access to them if you try to go directly to the resource, if you don't go through the library's proxy server, because if you're off campus, it'll ask you to sign in with your X500 and password, and then you'll get access to these things. So SimplyMap has a couple of options. You can create an account, or you can sign in as a guest. I'm just going to do it as a guest today. If you do create an account, what that does, it's a free account, and it just allows you to save what you're doing. So if you create a bunch of maps or reports, you can go back later, and those same ones will still be there. So you can see the way that it's set up. You've got variables, you've got locations, then you've got those business points. It does have a nice map wizard that will actually walk you through all the different parts of the process if you need to make a map. I'm just going to start with variables. So you can see kind of that I listed off in the slide there on the left-hand side. These are all the different categories they have. I'm going to start simple with census data for 2010. People, and let's do income. Lots of categories. It's the census. So we'll do household income, and then you get all of these options here. I'm just going to do median income. Now you do have the option when you're looking at it. I'd have to look behind the scenes to see exactly what they're doing when they're projecting median income for 2019. I don't know exactly what algorithms they're using for that. But at any time you can, for a given variable, click View Metadata, and it'll show you exactly where that comes from. So if it's coming directly from the census, this I'm assuming is coming from the ACS for 2010. But you can see where this stuff is coming from. So we're going to use that variable. And what that'll do is that'll just show us a map of the entire United States split up by median household income. You can then make it specific to locations. So we're going to do a city. We'll let the server catch up with us. So I'm going to do it from Minneapolis, and you don't have to do this, but one of the nice things that SimplyMap offers, and that I'll show once we get there, is it has a location mask. So if you're looking at this big set of data for the whole US, if you put in a specific location, it will then mask all the data outside of that, so you're not getting kind of the noise outside of your area of interest. So we'll do Minneapolis. And I should mention at the beginning, if you have questions as I'm going through or something's not clear, you're wondering about something that's up there, just let me know. Since we're doing live demo, we'll just do it as an informal process. We're also demoing the strength of the wireless in our room here. So once we get to there, so what I can talk about too is that SimplyMap is also very good in that they are very responsive to suggestions. So things like the location mask are things that were suggested to them. I was one of the people that suggested it, and they have added that functionality in. If I show you how to actually make a map, being able to move around the elements on that map when you export the map is also one of the things that they've added. So it's taking a very long time. So I will just zoom into Minneapolis. So as you zoom in, it's going to automatically give you what it thinks is the best level of detail. So whether it's going to do it by counties, whether it's going to do it by zip codes, you can force it in the legend there to display. So see, as I go in here, it's now changed to zip codes. If you wanted a higher level of detail, you could bump it down to census tracts, and so it's going to limit it by whatever variable you're using. So this is coming from the ACS, so it's not going to go down to block group level for this variable, it's just going to go down to tracts. But depending on what variables you're using, it'll give you those different options. So then if we look at businesses, So this is coming from Dun and Bradstreet's. You can just search by name. What I'm going to do, it's often better to use codes, and luckily you don't have to memorize all of the codes. They do give you a list. And so if you're looking for something, let's see, if we look for coffee shops, so it's going to give you all these different options. And then the one that I want is coffee shop. So it has 17,000 coffee shops in the database. And then you just click Show Businesses, and what's going to do, it's going to populate those in the maps. It will cluster them, so as you zoom in, they'll separate out a little bit. But it'll place those on the map. And then what you can do, we didn't get to location because it's a little slow, but I'll show you. Here's where you would apply a location mask if you wanted to limit the data to the location area you're looking at. Under Actions, here's where you can export map image. So I'm not going to go there given loading the different parts of it, but you can just move around the pieces, like I said, before you export your map. You can also export shapefiles, which is going to get you the data on the kind of polygon layer. So that's not going to get you the point data necessarily, but it's going to get you, so in this one, it would get us the household median income separated out by zip codes. If you click Make a Report from Businesses, what you're going to get there is a table showing all of those business locations. That'll show the name, it'll show the address, but as I mentioned, the good thing, too many at this location, so you have to zoom in a little bit more, but it'll also show you the latitude and longitude of that, so then you can just grab those and go and geocode them. All right. Yeah.
Is licensing for this if I take that data and use it for research?
Len, we're asked the question. Yep, the question is, can we use it for, what can we use the license data for? I'd have to look at the license specifically. It's definitely available for use on campus. It's available for research. It's available for education. We're also, I mean, we make this available. Anyone who comes to campus can use these resources. And so I would say you can't sell the data, but I would say a private business could come from off campus and use the data and use it for their own purposes. That's one of the things that licensors don't like when we first ask for a contract with them. But as an educational institution, that's just something that we insist on, is that anybody can come and use our resources. It does say that I think the licenses usually say that we'll make a reasonable effort not to violate the terms of the license, but we don't have any very strict use on there. Any of the stuff, anybody can come from anywhere, and we make that clear to the vendors when we sign contracts with them. Any other questions on SimplyMap?
You know offhand how good the documentation is? There's a lot of...
How good is the documentation?
Do they explain how they do this in 2014 zip code data?
How they project what the zip codes will be in different years. What you can do, so if you're looking at a given variable, let's say we look at that household median income. Yeah, so when you view the metadata, so this one's coming from 2010 from the Bureau of the Census. Let's see if it says in here. So these are coming from EASI. So I'm guessing even the ones that are projected forward, I'm sure it's their own algorithm of how they're doing it. They also, SimplyMap themselves, they do the aggregate the census data, they normalize the census data from 1980, from 1990. That's something I think a lot of companies have done. I know SimplyMap specifically has not done 1970 just because of the drastic changes between 70 and 80. There are other companies, Geolytics for one, that has done 1970 normalized into current boundaries. But most of the companies don't tell you exactly what their normalization algorithm is.
Ryan, is it just census data?
The question is it just census data? It's not. So we've got consumer expenditure data. So if you wanted to see in 2010 geographies how much people spent on footwear by household average, you can do that. Again, you can see, and this is actually coming from the census, or from the Bureau of Labor. So this is from surveys that they have done. There's a little bit more information in there, but you can, if you were to just go and say footwear by household average, I'm not sure how they're projecting this after 2019, but So it's got all of these different categories: retail sales, quality of life. It has some health data, so stuff related to different ailments. So in Minneapolis, apparently downtown does not spend a lot on shoes, and the suburban areas do. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to relate some of the. I've done some projects with people where they're relating consumer expenditures, and it is roughly analogous to median household income, unsurprisingly. But you might find some interesting pockets of Minnesota that like to spend more on footwear. Any other questions on SimplyMap?
You can class that.
Can we reclass it? You can, actually. Yep.
Oh, cool.
You can make them whatever you want. Yeah, so actually you can change it. It usually gives you, I mean, it will, SimplyMap does give you kind of the general breakdowns for these, or you can define it yourself. Number of categories, they give you a limited number of color ramps to use. Well, we can look in PolicyMap. I'm pretty sure they don't give you all the different, natural breaks or quantiles or whatever, but you can type in your own. Yes, you can. SimplyMap probably has the most advanced interface as far as what you're able to manipulate in what you're seeing. All right, so the next one we're going to look at is PolicyMap. So as I said, PolicyMap is more geared towards, say, the Humphrey School type of what people are looking at, maybe public health, stuff like that. So it does not yet let you download the GIS data, but it does even say on their website that they're working on that. But you can download the maps and you can download some of the statistical stuff. Given the connection speed, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but one other thing that you can do is you can do 3-layer maps, is what they call them. So you can actually layer or have 3 different sets of data and kind of cross-tab compare them on a map, which can get interesting. And you can also upload your own data points. So you can upload a spreadsheet, and again, you are kind of left at the mercy of their geocoding, but you can upload that data as well. So PolicyMap looks like this. I would say the graphical interface, the wrapper for the map is maybe not a bit better, but it's just as good as SimplyMap. The display of stuff themselves tends to be a little bit funny looking. They use kind of a caret or a kind of angled bracket for a lot of their point locations, which can get a little weird. And they're orange, and they generally use purple as a background. So it gets, we could maybe give them some tips on cartography, even digital cartography. But each one of these sets of things here has both point data and polygon data, depending on what's there. So you can add those kind of thematic data layers, and then you can add points, whether it's hospitals or schools or other things that they have available. They have, as I mentioned, the specialized data sets, so they have the limited supermarket access. So one of the comparisons I was going to do was if you have limited supermarket access, then they also have mapped farmers markets. So you could kind of compare and see, what farmers markets fall inside there, because usually for supermarket access, they don't, and food desert type things, they don't take other food sources into account. And then you can, again, edit the legend. You can save, you can print, and you can kind of get stuff out of there again. Since it's not loading, and I spent a significant amount of time talking about SimplyMap. Just from what I've said, are there any questions on PolicyMap? No?
Again, it's just university.
This is just university access. PolicyMap, I believe, does have some public access to it. It's limited in what you can do with it. But our license for it allows you to do kind of the full breadth of what they have available. And so I think this is published by a company called TRF, which I could be wrong, but I think they're actually a nonprofit. And so they do make some of their stuff available. And then I think they have, if you know an organization that's interested in using it, I would suggest contacting them, because I think they have a sliding scale of what they charge. Ours, since we have a very large university, we got charged the maximum. But relative to other resources, it's actually not that expensive.
And I would say university, is that all campuses?
That's a very good question. Is this all campuses? This is not. This is just the Twin Cities access for a lot of these. Some other campuses may have access too, and it wouldn't hurt to check. It depends on IP range, and so another way might be if you have access to VPN for the Twin Cities campus or something like that, and you can appear like you're on campus, you could use it then.
Proxy from outside, you can treat it if you have a
Yes, if you're off campus and you're a Twin Cities person, when you proxy in, it's as if you're on campus.
Would you have to have a Twin Cities X500?
I believe you would have to have a Twin Cities X500 for using it from off campus, unless you can sign into the Twin Cities VPN. So I won't go too deep, but this is kind of what they look like. So you've got data layers and data points for all this stuff. For under health, they've got farmers markets as kind of a polygon layer, but then they also have it as a point layer here, and you can do it either way. Yeah, so the map's not pretty, but those are the farmers markets in the United States. Which also, again, as with many map layers, once you've seen a lot of them, this might roughly be a population map of the U.S. But we'll leave that analysis for another day. But yeah, there's not a lot of options. Like, you can't change what it looks like. You can't necessarily. You can change if you have a polygon layer on here, a thematic layer. You can change the colors in a limited way, and you can change the breaks. But that's about it.
Did you say you could download the shapefiles for this?
You cannot download the shapefiles yet. That is coming. They have coming soon up on there under the download icon. And I've been working on them for a few things. They're a new company. We just started subscribing to this about a year ago, 15 months ago. So they're kind of working on, they already came up, this is their 2.0 interface that came up earlier this spring. And then their ability to print stuff has been upgraded, and their ability to find the metadata for what's behind their data layers has been upgraded, mostly as librarians have been berating them with questions about where this stuff comes from. And download was another big one that I think theoretically shouldn't be too hard to implement, but they haven't done yet. But from what they tell me and from what it says here, they're working on that. Any other questions on this one? All right. So I'm going to move on to here. So another big one is Data Planet statistical data sets. And actually, maybe I will be smart and let that one load in the background. So Data Planet is, it's an interesting history of this one. It used to be part of ProQuest, if people are familiar with that company. Very big company. Data Planet was a small portion of it that ProQuest had kind of contracted with. They've now split off on their own. So they're developing sort of quickly what they're able to do. They totally revamped their interface. It's access to nearly 500,000 data sets. Now, a lot of these data sets are publicly available, but this is kind of this aggregates them all into one spot. It also has stuff from major intergovernmental organizations, so it has data from the UN, it has data from the World Bank, it has data from OECD, it has stuff from private organizations and federal agencies and states. It does have shapefile download for many of the layers, and you can download the data for any of the data sets, either as they have charts, you can do a bar chart or a pie chart, or just get the data itself. And when you have the data available, you can download it in SPSS, SAS, Excel, CSV, PDF, or if it's geographic data as a shapefile. So this is one that was licensed for 3 years as the ProQuest product. It just switched over. We've licensed it for another year to see what kind of use we're going to get on campus. We had a significant number of uses 2 years ago, not so much this past year. So we're kind of paying for it for another year and see if we get interest from people. And we're still loading that one. But what you get is an interface that you can either go, there's a big kind of catalog tray on the left-hand side. You can search either by type of data, you can search by data organization, by the provider, and then based on what's there, you can visualize it either as a map or as a graph. For the US data, it breaks down usually by state, so you can see the whole US by state, or you can go individually by state and then by county, or you can, for a lot of them, do the whole US by county, which can kind of give you an idea of how certain data breaks down, but it's everything from, so they have like food and agriculture, so they have farm counts. So you can see like the amount of land in farms by state, by county. They have prices and cost of living, so they have stuff on food stamps. You can see the percent of population in each state or in each county that gets assistance from food stamps. You can also show stuff that doesn't have a geographic extent. So non-map stuff, it shows National Science Foundation, it shows grants, and you can look at the source of funds as the federal government, and then show a ranking of all. You can either show it by institution, by state, by county. As when I was setting this up, Johns Hopkins gets a large share of federal NSF grants, which is also not surprising, but you can kind of see where, say, the university or whoever falls in that. We'll come back to that one. Any questions overall on Data Planet before I talk about other things? This is one that I think if you're looking for some sort of data, especially if you want it geographically, I'd suggest trying here. Like I said, it has a lot of freely available data, but normally if you go and get that freely available data, you're just going to get a spreadsheet, you're just going to get a PDF, something like that. Here you can actually get it attached to the proper boundaries. So it can be helpful that way. Social Explorer, how many people have used Social Explorer? A bunch of people, all right. So Social Explorer, just very briefly, census data for the US, 1790 up through, they have stuff from 2013. Data comes from NHGIS, which is part of the Population Center here on campus, related to the Population Center. You can select geographic areas and export as a spreadsheet. So this is something that I use significantly with, say, undergrads, especially, maybe even grad students. I use this instead of the Census Bureau's website a lot of times, especially if you're doing like an area study and you only need to grab a small couple of square miles even of either census tracts or blocks. You can just zoom into your area, find your variable, select the ones you want, and it'll export it as Excel or as CSV. The nice thing you can do with this also is you can have it, if you're working with income, you can have it adjust for inflation. So if you're looking at 1980 median household income, you can just select a box that says update the dollar amounts to 2010 or whatever year you want, adjusted for inflation. So if you're trying to compare one set of data to another. You can save and print the maps. So it's not the greatest interface, but you can, if you're looking at a map, you can export it. So this is, again, something that especially with like undergrads, if you're working with students that are needing to create just a quick map of demographics for a certain area, and you want them to be able to include it in a report or something like that, you can use Social Explorer for that one. The last two are kind of interesting cases. So China Geo Explorer 2, we never did use China Geo Explorer 1, but that's the current one. So that is something that is specific to China. So it's kind of a specific research area. It's something that we subscribe to partially because of the size of the country and the number of people there. We're also trying to add for our GS holdings and stuff like that for India as well, just looking at the types of research that go on around the university. This one you can use map, you can visualize the stuff, you can print the maps, you can create a thematic map in there, but it's also, the map is also their interface for downloading data. So if you want to go in and get, say, they have land use, they have business data, they have economic data, they have census and demographic data. So you could go in and get land use. You can show, say, cultivated dry land in Beijing, and then export that GIS data and go kind of work with it on your own. You can also go by district, and so you can go by district, by province. You can kind of split it up in a lot of different ways. So if you're looking for, if you are anybody else looking for specific GIS data for China, China Geo Explorer 2, it doesn't exactly inspire, that's why I want to look for GIS data, but that is kind of the interface. And all of this stuff is coming from the China Data Center at the University of Michigan. So they're kind of one of the premier places to access that kind of data. Any questions on that stuff? No. And the last one is a very unique case. Let's see if I can get it to load. EV GeoCloud. Yeah, Data Planet isn't up yet. May or may not come up. EV-GeoCloud is something that is provided, we're paying for it, coming from Eastview Geospatial, which is a company that's actually located in the West Metro of the Twin Cities. So it is a data portal, so it's not a data provider in and of itself, but we license several data sets that appear in there. One of them is Landscan. Does anybody use Landscan? Does anybody do population density study for anywhere in the world? Nobody in this room? If you are working with anyone who's looking for that, Landscan shows 1 kilometer population density for the entire world, and it's as a raster layer. And so you can do some analysis of it in the web application. You can draw a custom area of interest, and you can see what the population is in that area. You can see a breakdown goes down to first level administrative division for each country. And you can then see what the breakdown is by sex and by age. And then you can also download the data. So you can grab a certain part of the data, it'll download it as a raster, and then you could use that to do some analysis. The other major data set we have in there is from a company called D'Agostini, and this is world indicators. So it's 400 economic indicators. So things like tourism receipts. So you could visualize a data set for the world that has how much money is spent by tourists in that country. You can do olive oil production. So that's something that you can look at, and it doesn't have data for every country depending on what level it falls at, but it's using worldwide data sets to kind of bring in all of this stuff. It's stuff from energy, things from goods and production, tourism. It has stuff I think on poverty as well. And so you can do some data analysis there, but then you can also just download the data. So you can either download the whole thing, or you can just draw a box around the area that you want, check 10 out of the 400 layers, and then just get all of that data from them. So that's something that we just licensed in August. And so that's kind of a new one that we're working on promoting. If you're working with EV-GeoCloud and you see some functionality that you'd like to have that's not there, let me know. We're one of the guinea pigs for this, and we're sort of a development partner of theirs. Actually, the guy who designed the initial interface was a former MJS grad student. And so we work closely with them as far as informing them of what might be more useful, what might be available for people, and how it might be better used. They're coming up with ways to add your own data. You can actually annotate the maps, and you can add your own shapefiles too, is something that is kind of unique. So if you want to study a certain data set in world indicators and you want to upload a shapefile of rivers or something like that, to kind of, if it's working with power or something, you can upload your own shapefiles and then create maps out of those. Any questions on that?
For Landscan, I needed the entire state of Minnesota.
For Landscan, if we want the entire state of Minnesota, that is downloadable. You can draw your own area of interest, or you can download it by country, even. So you could, if you wanted, you could draw a rough box around Minnesota, download that, and then clip it to some other boundary file you had, or a raster file you have. But you can either download directly by entire country, or you can draw an area of interest and download that. Yeah, good. Any other questions? All right. If you have questions on any of this stuff, just let me know. My information's on the Map Library website. You can find it there. And then I'm going to turn this over to Kevin. Yeah, Jonathan.
Are these links on the library website?
Yes. They're either listed on the main library website under databases by name, if you can remember exactly what they are. I also have called out most of them on the Borchardt Library page. There's a link on the left-hand side that says Licensed Tools and Databases, and all the ones I talked about today are linked there, if you're looking for them specifically. And then the presentation's here too, if you want to get back to the information about each one. And there is a description, see if you can get the library page to load. There is a description on the library page of each of the databases as well, if you're looking for more information. Yeah. All right. On that note, I'm going to turn this over to Kevin.
Keep this shut.
Someone just said they should begin to slide. What's the
economic assets?
The product that demonstrates economic assets, probably, are they looking, Social Explorer is just census data, so they're probably thinking about SimplyMap.
Or at the end?
Or at the end, we do have,
D'Agostini had some.
D'Agostini has some also. So with EV GeoCloud, yeah, economic indicators is through the D'Agostini data inside EV GeoCloud.
Looks like it loaded. EVGO Cloud.
Oh, good. There's EV GeoCloud. Kind of a slick interface. See if it loads right away, otherwise we'll pass it by. So for the D'Agostini data, once it loads, there's a big list of stuff here. But yeah, was that the one they were thinking of? Could be, yeah. So here's the different 400 different data sets. Motorcycles, I saw copper, lead, mortality rates. It has all sorts of different stuff in there, all kind of split out by theme. And once you have a certain one, it'll give you the information where it comes from, and then you can also see it as a bar chart, or you can view it on the map, or you can download the data. Okay.
All right, thanks Ryan. Thanks everyone for joining us. My little portion of our brown bag is going to be a bit different, not so much focusing on licensed databases or actual data per se, but rather a different sort of web mapping application as far as those of us who are coming from the GIS end of things are familiar with, and that's called Neatline. And the idea of Neatline is that it allows you to do some really multifaceted map-enhanced storytelling. And the reason you may not have heard of Neatline coming from web mapping, the Esri sort of world, is that Neatline is a plugin for the Omeka platform. And Omeka, I'll get into that in a minute, but it facilitates creation of sort of online exhibits that have a spatial focus. And Omeka is itself a digital publishing platform that allows you to take a collection of items, and these items can be anything, and build an exhibit around it online. And it's been used in a lot of different ways that I'll detail a little bit. And it's also, and Neatline is fully open source, Omeka is fully open source, and fairly easy to configure and install as well. And interestingly enough, Omeka is created by the same folks who created Zotero, which some of you may be familiar with, is one of the more popular reference managers out there. Also open source and free, and really quite powerful in its way. What's really interesting with Omeka is that you can, rather than adding your own items or records for building an exhibit, if you have, say, a Zotero library containing a group of primary source documents that you've gathered, you can actually install a plugin to Omeka that will import all of those items directly into Omeka, allowing you to really build an exhibit fairly quickly if you've been using Zotero for your research. It's really pretty great. When we're thinking about Omeka in terms of, well, where does it really fall in the realm of web software that's out there? And you can see here from the About page, it's at the crossroads of content management, collections management, and digital collection systems for archives. And that's really going from the level of content management. We can think of Drupal, we think of WordPress. We're all kind of familiar with that. But then you see the bottom of this chart here, that's where things like DSpace and Fedora, and then which you may have heard of, and then things that chances are not many of us are familiar with, such as TMS and Pachyderm and things like that, that are focused on, that are official online exhibit systems. So Omeka is really at the crossroads of all those pieces of software out there. So, just to give you a sense of what sorts of things have been done with Omeka before I get into Neatline and the mapping component that it brings to the table with Omeka. Omeka has been used here at the university. The libraries actually have an installation of Omeka that's a little long in the tooth at this point, but there are plans to upgrade it. But here you can see there's an exhibit detailing the history of Memorial Stadium, the late Memorial Stadium, as you can see here. And that really runs through, brings in a bunch of multimedia and allows you to tell a story. And here is another example. This is an exhibit that was put on by the Newberry Library in Chicago, detailing Abe Lincoln at 200, a sort of a bicentennial celebration, showing a couple different aspects of Abe Lincoln's life, drawing on a lot of materials housed at the Chicago History Museum as well as the Newberry Library, and bringing those all online. And then there's Martha Washington, our first lady, and there's a really excellent exhibit detailing her life, and really this is as you can see, it's really Omeka allows you to do some very rich multimedia work. So images, documents, archival materials, they all are kind of at your fingertips with Omeka. Multimedia again. And what's really exciting and great about Omeka, at least from a librarian standpoint, is the idea that it utilizes Dublin Core as the metadata standard. So if you have a bunch of records from an archive or a library, chances are you'll be able to get those in a format using Dublin Core as the format. And when it comes to the spatial aspect, Dublin Core has a field called coverage, which can be specialized to indicate spatial coverage, but unfortunately that field is just plain text. And the idea is that it was meant to be as descriptive as possible, so allowing people to use a place name was kind of the idea behind the spatial coverage element in Dublin Core. But some people have used it for coordinates and bounding boxes, but there's no real, it's been a very ad hoc sort of process. So really trying to use Dublin Core for mapping and geographic metadata tends to lead to chaos. So long story short, if you want to work with geographic information within Omeka and relate geographic information to items that you might have in an Omeka database or exhibit, that's where Neatline comes in and makes things a lot easier. So I'll just a little bit about what Neatline really is all about, and then we can show some examples here. So here you can see Neatline allows you to bring a spatial context to archival documents. So here, this is the Neatline interface, and over on the left-hand side you can see a list of 52 records, and these are actually items from a Zotero library that I imported into Omeka and then created a Neatline exhibit using those items. And this allows you to then take one of these items, which are just publications, and then it allows you to tie that to a particular area on a map. And what the kind of area you can draw a polygon. So here, as you can see, just a simple box, but you can also add your own custom SVG code if you want to do some really, really intricate shapes and other things on your map, which is something that, as far as the ease of use and the real power of it, is something I've yet to see in other web mapping applications. And I'll show you a few examples of how people have used SVG, scalable vector graphics, for the non-nerds out there, and how those can be used to really make a beautiful and interesting Neatline exhibit. So here you can see another example of annotating, and something that Neatline really excels at is working with non-georeference materials or materials that are not, that will get really distorted if you try and georeference them, which is generally the case with most historical maps. And this example here, some of you may be familiar with the Ricci map that the Bell Library purchased for several $1 million recently. That's actually my background of the presentation here, and it's a huge map and just really vast. The dimensions are bigger than one of these tables in front of us, I can tell you that, and just covered with really intricate text. And I really think that using something like Neatline where someone could just highlight some characters and then plugging in an interpretation or explanation of those characters would really serve to help in terms of, would help educators, but would also help scholars to get their work out there in terms of interpreting documents like this. Another really strong aspect of Neatline is the integration of temporal analysis. So there's built-in capabilities for using timelines and adding dates and things like that to your exhibits. Here, this is actually an exhibit talking about the Battle of Chancellorsville from the Civil War, and here you can see these very clean, semi-opaque arrows drawn on the map that's been georeferenced onto the base map, and these are examples of someone who probably created that line in Adobe Illustrator, exported it as an SVG, took the code and just pasted it into the box in Neatline, and then ended up with this with these shapes. So that's an advanced use of Neatline here, but it's also showing you just how easy it is to do some really intricate, the cartographic possibilities of working with Neatline are almost unlimited when you add in the SVG capability. So that's really cool. You can see the timeline up here, and then breaking down further within each waypoint on the timeline, you can split up and really tell a fairly complicated story in a single interface, which is, as most of us are probably familiar with, kind of difficult to do without totally overwhelming and turning off users. Again, I want to emphasize the highly customizable nature of Neatline. Here's another example where someone took a photograph from Gemini 5 right here of the Baja California and overlaid it onto existing to modern satellite imagery from Mapbox, and did some pretty nifty SVG work to really show where these images are coming from and tie it together, and then also to tell a story to bring it all together. So really this is not your usual Google map. This is not even your usual Mapbox sort of map. It's something that can really bring an individuality and real style to telling stories with maps. And just one more little example of what you can do with Neatline. This is actually the memorial for the bombing at the Boston Marathon a couple years ago, and this is a WBUR public radio station project, a public history, and they actually took this placard that people signed and used Neatline to annotate and group a lot of the different annotations, a lot of what people wrote on there, and as you hover over them, it'll show you the rest of the group. So just for example, all the times where someone wrote Boston Strong, there are over 50 instances of it on this placard here, and so that's really, this is not a map. I think we can all agree on that, but using the annotation capabilities of Neatline, it lets you do, working with images really takes on a new dimension and new possibilities. And what's really great, and maybe my favorite part about Neatline, is that it's not a walled garden in the sense that you're tied into Omeka or Neatline once you've created your exhibit. Every Neatline exhibit has a full screen mode, which then allows you to embed the map anywhere you want to, in your own website, if you've using iframes, you can use it with something such as Scalar, which is from the University of Southern California, a really highly adaptable and really, I think, up-and-coming platform for digital storytelling and publishing. But the point is that Neatline lets you take your work and go elsewhere with it. You're not tied in, and that's really, I think, an important aspect. And the fact that it's written fully open source, written in PHP and JavaScript, something, if you need a feature, and you have some capability when it comes to programming or know someone who can help you out for a couple hours, it's easy enough to add a feature that you really might need. which is more than we can say about a lot of the other web mapping platforms out there. So really, to sum up, Neatline, it's worth giving a shot for all the reasons I mentioned above. Ease of use, extensibility, and openness. It's really a great platform published by the Scholars Lab at University of Virginia and a group of other collaborators. So if you have any questions about Neatline or want to check it out, feel free to contact me. Installation is really not too bad. It took me probably 5 minutes to install Omeka and then to install Neatline on top of it if you have access to a server somewhere. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
How about the learning?
I'd say for a simple, for an exhibit where you just have a base map that you want to bring in and then add some annotations, it's really easy. Like, it's a very clean, I would open up, well, we can live a little dangerously. So I'll just log in here. So here you can see this is Omeka. This is what you'll see on the dashboard of any Omeka installation. And then to get to Neatline, you just go here, and if you want to create an exhibit, you can just go to Create. There's our spectacular exhibit. And here you can see the array of spatial layers that you can make available to any exhibit that you might have. So everyone's a fan of the Stamen watercolor. And then if you wanted to use a WMS layer as your base map, that's also pretty easy to do here. You can just add the address of where the WMS server is coming from, and then the layers that you want to include. And that actually works quite seamlessly. The mapping component of Neatline is built on OpenLayers 2. They're a work in progress to move into OpenLayers 3. But OpenLayers 3 itself is still a work in progress, so you know how that goes. Then if I save that exhibit, so here you can see, here's our exhibit. And let's say I can add a new record, which is basically an item. And here I'll call this Twin Cities. And here are all the different options for oh, that's unfortunate. Well, you can take a guess. There are buttons on the left of those things. But here you can see draw polygon. So I'll pick that. And then it's a matter of just clicking and dragging. And it actually shows you the geometry that you've drawn as well-known text down at the bottom. So it's at one time easy to use, easy enough, but it also exposes a lot of the inner workings and kind of what makes things tick that a lot of certain people, certain users might be interested in. So you can take so you could actually paste in well-known text if you had a really intricate shape from some other source that you wanted to bring in, copy, paste, done, which is really something you don't have with a lot of others. So now if I saved it.
Is it projected or unprojected for you?
It's.
If you were going to copy and paste, would maybe that
it would probably be Web Mercator. It might work with, it's probably Web Mercator or unprojected lat long is my guess. I haven't tried one or the other to see how it actually works, but as with so many web mapping applications, when you bring in UTM coordinates or anything like that, that's gonna add an additional amount of complexity. But the fact that it's built using open layers makes it a possibility to do that kind of work, as opposed to other tools that make it a little more difficult. So here you can see we added that item. Now you can hover over it. It says Twin Cities. Oh, cool. So that's really, and that's all it takes. And you can customize the look and feel of an exhibit using straight up CSS, if you know that. And there's also, there's a lot of templates that they have and a lot of demos that really, and the documentation I should mention for Neatline is quite excellent as far as an open source project goes. They have a fancy logo too.
You mentioned the libraries as an instance.
We do, but it's internally facing at this point. So there's no, it's not so much something that we could all start using. But for example, for this installation I have is on a virtual server through DigitalOcean.com, which is $5 a month. It lets you install whatever you want. Some nerdiness required to get that going, but it is easy enough. And I'm more than willing to help someone work through an installation. And here you can see just all of these, creating new records, searching records, using style sheets. So I mean, this is fairly complete and really helpful. And when it comes to asking for help, the developers and maintainers of Neatline are really, really responsive, which is really all you want and what you really need when it comes to working with open source software. It's I'm sure it's possible to install on Windows. That's generally the response, but it's made for Linux operating systems, which on the one hand is can be tricky if you're coming from a Windows background, but it's also very cost effective if you're using something like Amazon's cloud services, because you can get a very cheap / free Linux-based server for free. Never mind that language. Any other?
Can you pay for Omeka to use it on their site or something? If they have,
I believe you can,
if you don't have access.
which is a very good point. Let's see. Well, here you can see there's a sandbox. There's also, oh, that's it. So I'm thinking, Omeka.net, I'm thinking is a hosted service that lets you set up your own instance of Omeka without being a giant nerd. Let's see, I bet there's a free plan. Oh, maybe not. Oh, free basic plan. 500 megabytes of storage, 13 plugins, 5 themes. That's really all you would need. So you could just sign up for the free plan, pick Neatline as a plugin, and you're off and running. And then that lets you export everything you made too. So not bad at all. Any other questions?
How much work have you done on it? Have you started a project yourself or anything?
I've started a few. My major exposure with it has been more on the development side. And that's been taking the Ricci map, which is just a scanned image, and using Zoomify tiles, which is the idea of creating a Google-like set of tiles for any given image. That's something that Photoshop can do out of the box with a single click. And I added support for that in Neatline. So the idea is that you can zoom around, and this is a very large image, something that would be really prohibitive for someone to bring in. And just in case, this is, I think it's a 1602 map of the world. It's the first Chinese map that had the Americas included on it, if I'm correct. So it's really a very important map, and it's also just really gorgeous. It's, the amount of detail is just mind-blowing. Like,
It's 5 feet by 12 feet.
I mean, just look at each of these lines. That is excruciating to think about the amount of work it took to put together. That makes my clicking to edit an arc map seem inconsequential in comparison. So that's the extent of my work with it. I've had, like many of us, I've had grand plans of building a Neatline exhibit highlighting, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the co-op wars in the Twin Cities back in the 60s and 70s. That's been my, unfortunately, having a child kills those sorts of dreams.
It's all done.
On that note.
Doesn't kill the dream, it kills the operation.
That's right. But yes, the dream is still alive. Come 2035, I'll be really tackling that.
Can you bring in HTML code into this and have it run HTML code?
Yeah, that's another, that's a great question and a great comment. I'll go back to my exhibit here. I don't want to change my password. Interesting. Oh. And where I just wrote cool in our record, in our exhibit. Over here, where you can't see, you can see for the title, you can work with full HTML. And then also when it comes to the body, you can use HTML. So if you wanted to embed an image, if you want to embed a video, a PDF, that's all available to you as well. So it really lets you bring in the multimedia aspect of Omeka within Neatline and vice versa. So there's really a lot of, again, that customizability when it comes to an info window that can be really kind of a pain in the butt to do with other web mapping platforms. It's not so bad here with Neatline. Here you can see all these options. You don't have to know CSS to make it happen. If you want to make the color pink, there you go. Pretty exciting stuff, I know. Any other questions? All right.
Kevin and Ryan, and thanks to everyone who came out today and who tuned in online. This is our last speaker series of the semester, but we'll be up again and running next semester with monthly speaker series. So stay tuned to the U-Spatial bulletins on the website for updates on upcoming speakers. And if you'd like to be a speaker yourself, let me know. We can get you signed up. So thanks a lot. That's it.